Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the People on the Go Lunch and Learn webinar. My name is Melissa Sweat, Online Community Manager at People on the Go, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. Before we start, let's check and make sure that you can see the screen and hear me. If you could please type a brief note into the questions panel, letting me know that you can hear me and see the screen, that would be great. Thank you so much for those responses. In case you are having technical difficulty, the technical support number to call is 1-800-263-6317. Today's webinar is Lean in Action, Streamline Your Processes and Achieve Results. And I have with me Pierre, who I'll be introducing in just a moment. A quick background about why we have these sessions, especially to those who are with us for the first time. We have these sessions because our focus is productivity in the workplace at People on the Go, and the topics that you see on the screen are the topics that we cover. We have them available in a variety of formats, including the webinar format, just like today's session. The webinars are offered on a monthly basis, and you can check them out on the website. The URL is on the screen, and I've also sent you the link there in the chat box. We also have a membership program that makes these webinars very easy to take advantage of. And we also have many resources available like the blog, Facebook, and LinkedIn groups. And you can also follow our founder, Pierre Khawand, on Twitter. And so now let's dive into today's topic. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Pierre. Pierre has over 20 years of experience in the technology industry, spanning the defense, telecom, and healthcare sectors. As Director of IT Quality at UCSF Medical Center, he is focused on enterprise IT value, process improvement, and service quality. In his spare time, he is the IT Program Director for the Mission Bay Hospital's construction effort, due to open in February 2015. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pierre. This transition will take just a moment.
Okay. Hi, I'm Pierre. I'm the IT Quality Director at UCSF Medical Center. And so what I was asked to talk about today after I'd met the other Pierre Khawand, about 6 months ago, was he was interested in some of the lean work that we were doing at UCSF. So we'll take you through kind of some of the lean basics for those that are not familiar with lean, how to apply it in your work setting, and give an example of some of the things that we've done at UCSF by using lean methodology. So here's a quick overview of the agenda, talk about the origins, a bit about aligning vision and purpose with lean, talking about the premise of customer-based value, and we'll get into some of the actual operational aspects of lean. So what is lean? It's a very common question, and it means a lot of different things to different people. So lean can start off as a philosophy. It's also has to do with process and methods. Some organizations just use lean tools to kind of streamline some of their processes. But in the very successful organizations that kind of take all of this ends up becoming a lean culture. And we'll talk about some of the differences. There's certainly improvements that can be made by using any of these aspects of lean, but the biggest wins are when an entire enterprise, an entire organization adopts this lean philosophy and it becomes part of their culture. So organizational alignment in your vision and purpose. It's very often right now within a number of sectors, you wonder how many number one priorities do we have? You know, what's the priority? Well, everything is. So so having a lean alignment with your organizational vision and purpose is really important. Customer-based value is steps within a business process that are truly providing value to the customer. So if we think within a good use case would be if I want to travel somewhere by flight, the time that it takes me to drive to the airport, to check in baggage, to wait to board the plane, and all of those things, those are not really value added. The main purpose that I wanted this was to get me from point A to point B. So there are a lot of steps in that process that are not of value. Same kind of thing within common business practices. And the center of lean is to focus on customer-based value. Another aspect is to identify and eliminate waste. So the right process will produce the right results. And we have a number of different ways to identify waste, and we define waste a little bit later on in this presentation. Another big aspect of lean is to develop and empower your people, because the people doing the work, they actually know more about the work that they're doing a lot of times than leadership and management do. And lean is not about leadership kind of deciding in the basement, a smoky basement of what process they want to change, and then they come out and reveal it to the people of how they've modified their process. Lean is very empowering. It's expected that people that are doing the actual work know best about the improvements to be made. Now, they need to be facilitated through the journey, but they're certainly part of the solutioning. And then lean is also continuous improvements, where we want to question paradigms just simply because this is the way we've always done things at company X. Doesn't mean that's the best way of doing things, and we should chase root causes. And to get to a root cause within lean thinking is we typically ask the question why 5 times. Why did this break? And then an answer will be given, and we'll say, well, then why did whatever the response was? Usually by the 5th why, 5 or 6, you can get to the root cause of why something actually occurred. And another part of continuous improvement is even when a process has been improved and leaned up, we don't want to just rest on those past improvements. It's expected that it's a continuous improvement program. It's very iterative, and just because a process has been refined and it works great right now, there's just a number of factors within a length of time. 2 years later, you may need to address that process again. So in a nutshell, it is philosophy, it is process, it's tools, it's methods, and eventually culture. If the entire organization embraces it, it's empowering to the people, it aligns with the organizational vision. So to get to the origins, originally this was lean was very much associated with the automotive industry. So Toyota, the father of the Japanese Industrial Revolution, was lean thinking early on where he designed a loom where if a single thread broke within the loom, it would automatically stop. Otherwise, it would just be a ball of thread. So that was one of the very beginnings of thinking about stopping a defect when it's found in production, stopping it at the point of the defect, resolving it and moving on rather than just continuing to move the conveyor belt kind of things. Also, Henry Ford invented the moving assembly line, and his premise was rather than bringing people to the work, he wanted to bring work to the people. So that was another very early, an early adoption of what is something that becomes a lean premise today. Also, one of the things that he implemented is he raised the daily wage to $5, and at that time that was considered to be very much a big increase to the common wage earner. Then in the 1940s, Ono, who was a production engineer at Toyota, he applied these same concepts of non-value activities within the Toyota production line, and along with the concept of just-in-time. So what that means is not having a surplus of parts or items that are queued up and waiting for something to happen, that there was, in order to have good flow within a production line, that things would show up just in time as somebody reaches out to use it. And so that became the kind of the pillar, or those of just in time and then stopping the line, as was the example of the loom. Those became the pillars of what is the Toyota production system. And Toyota production system is the basis for lean. So this makes a lot of sense within industrial, automotive kind of factory work, but it's something that a lot of the other industries have been looking at and trying to figure out how do we apply these principles within IT or within healthcare or within a number of other industries. And it's been proven that there is a very natural progression into other industries. So I'll talk a bit about how UCSF Medical Center has been using lean. So in regards to aligning our vision and purpose with lean at UCSF Medical Center, we have three main kind of visions are to be the best provider of healthcare. So in order to do that, lean aligns by having standard work that enables the staff to provide the most predictable and safe outcomes with every single procedure. Standard work is something that if we know is a best practice, then everybody should follow that. Also, a relentless focus on value from the patient or internal customer's perspective. So once again, looking at what is value added to the patient. It's not sitting in a waiting room, or it's not waiting in your bed 5 hours beyond the point of time that you should have been discharged, but true customer value is from their perspective. Another aspect of lean aligning with our vision is to be the best place to work. So improvement initiated and driven by staff creates a sense of engagement. It's a feeling within the organization that they can impact change and their destiny is held within their own hands. And leaders are also encouraging staff to participate in these lean activities and in lean thinking. And then our third portion of the vision statement is to be the best environment for teaching and research. Once again, this is where everyone is encouraged to participate and contribute in this process. So that's how we at UCSF have aligned our vision with some of the lean activities. So I've talked a little bit about customer-based value. And so when one of the basic tools of lean is to, if you have a problem statement, you would look at a workflow and you would look at customer inputs and transactions and and ultimately what the output of that workflow is. And you would look at it keenly from the customer's point of view, and you would map out all the various steps in the process, and you start to measure durations and how much time it takes and outputs, and you basically identify each step as either it's a value-added activity from the customer's perspective. So as an example, the value-added activity of flying from San Francisco to New York is the actual flight itself, where you're covering the distance in a fairly fast, in a very short duration. That's a value-added activity in that use case. Non-value added activities are the waiting in line for security, waiting in line maybe on the tarmac as you take off, etc. But then there are also non-value added but essential activities, because it's nearly impossible to reduce all of the non-value added steps within any kind of business process. So these are steps that they might be considered waste from the customer, but they're absolutely business critical. So something would be the security screening, especially if it has something to do with a regulatory or some kind of auditing step. Those are non-value added, but they're essential activities. So when we start a value stream analysis, we would map out the current state process. And what I mean by we is there's typically a lean facilitator, and then there would be representatives from every single group that is involved within that process. And I'll give you some examples of one of our processes in a minute, but if we were to still focus on, let's say, the airline example, we might have people from reservations or the booking of the ticket. We would have people that do some kind of screening when you first on board or when you first enter the airport. We would have security, maybe baggage handlers, of course the pilot, etc. So you get an idea that this is a very cross-functional group of folks that you get into one room to really map out that current state process. And you typically use Post-it notes and lay it on a wall, and you need a really large room because one of the things in it we find is, even though a lot of times we say, yes, there is a process, when you start laying it out, there's many times that there are multiple processes, or there's forks in the road that you maybe didn't anticipate that were part of your process, but then after a group discussion, people start asking, but what about in this situation? So eventually you get the current state process mapped out. And it becomes very, very obvious where some of your waste areas are. And then once that is mapped out, you start looking for those either the areas that are queuing, or there's multiple entries into, maybe there's multiple request entries, or there's something just very not efficient. And we'll get into some of the details of waste and the definition of waste in a minute. But then we'd also use lean tools, and they're described as the 5S or the 6S, and typically these are sort, straighten, scrub, or clean, standardize, sustain, and safety. And that can be as simple as applying the 5S to a workspace. That just means workspaces should have a standard way of being laid out. There should, you should look at from office to office, kind of how printers are utilized, or there's a number of different examples of how to standardize things in that area. Within IT, it's slightly different. A lot of the work we do is not putting things into bins or moving or straightening and sorting physical items, but you can apply the same kind of thing even within Outlook. You can sort your email, and you can straighten, and you can standardize the way email subject lines are, the way that you use the ability to CC people. Those are all areas that you could straighten, slightly different than the auto industry would sort and straighten, but it's still a very meaningful way of reducing waste. So through that, you would define your standard work, and from there you would develop what your future state process was. And what your future and your ideal state process is, you're trying to identify, reduce all of those areas of waste. And sometimes it's easier to go from current state to ideal state, because people get locked into a paradigm of, you can understand the current, and you can understand kind of minor changes that might make sense to make. But if you take it all the way out to an ideal state, that's the best way to just really think outside of the box of, what would this look like if we could really free ourselves from the current shackles? And then you reel it back in a little bit to, well, we can't achieve that today, but within the next year we can achieve this future state. So here's just a quick picture of some of the value stream mapping of the current state and the number of groups that we had, and you can see that you go through quite a few post-it notes, and then ultimately you get to a much more streamlined future state. So some of the operational wastes are defects, and those are pretty self-explanatory, of something didn't work the way we expected it to work, or waiting, whether that's waiting for an email response to come back, or waiting for some kind of batch job to happen, or there's a number of times that we're waiting for information or waiting for a service. Motion or movement, that would be, anytime, it could be something as simple as having to walk to get things off the print machine or a fax machine, or within a hospital, sometimes nurses will end up walking miles within the course of an evening, simply because of kind of inefficient layouts of the hospital, or just the tasks in order that they do things. Transportation would be, delivering of goods, or sometimes transporting people or resources. Inventories is, this is something that within auto industry, obviously a production line didn't want to have an excess of inventory. But the same kind of thing, if we think within our day and age, email is an inventory where email backs up, and then eventually you have to catch up with taking action with each email. And if you think of email as a widget or something on your conveyor belt that you have to take action with, a lot of times we have an excess inventory of email or orders or things backed up in our work queue. Overprocessing is sometimes we find that we don't trust the process, so we will double check and triple check, and then we pass it on to the next person, and they check just one more time just in case. And although it's all an effort to ensure that you have something done correctly, that's a bit of over-processing. And with the right process, we would be able to trust that that either the decision that was already made was the correct decision, or we're not worried about passing a defect down the line. Overproduction, very similar to over-processing. And then underutilization is just kind of one of the sins of just not utilizing staff to their fullest extent and potential, and it's just not it's not respectful to the employee to provide a very chaotic workspace where there is no standardized way of doing things and not understanding what's expected of them. That's underutilization of the staff. So I'll get into our case study at UCSF. Our main focus in the example I'm giving you is the turnaround time for laptops and iPhones was taking longer than what was expected. And so we went through, in that value stream mapping, we identified some basic problems, were the information gathering when somebody requested either a laptop or a desktop or a new iPhone. In some cases, it would be sent via an email or sometimes via the website, or sometimes it would be somebody within IT that had a friend that was in this department. They'd ask for a favor, hey, I've got 3 new employees, and they would just give them a verbal. And so what ended up happening is we did not have accurate information. And sometimes there was missing information as in regards to when it was needed or where it should be delivered. So in this, you define during the value stream mapping and in reflection, you're able to identify a number of problems. You hypothesize what the potential root problems are. One of our suspects were in our ticketing system is we ended up using a lot of free text fields where people would just kind of provide a free text description of what their issue was. And we decided that by creating more standardized fields that had drop downs, that we were able to get more accurate information. So you can see from, and I'm not going to go through every single detail, but you can see that we had identified that there were not established iPhone deployment processes. We were switching from BlackBerry to iPhone. That inventory management, we didn't have a real great grasp on what our demand was going to be. So we didn't have proper inventories or par levels. And a lot of folks within the field services team, depending on the assignment that they received, they might do things slightly different or slightly different order depending on the person that was assigned the ticket. So in looking through those, each of those problems, we had given several potential root causes and potential solutions. Through the Kaizen event or the rapid improvement event, what the goal is to make some on the spot. You spend a week doing this, but you do some on the spot changes, some experiments to your process. And then you take measurements and you see in the workspace, are these providing value? Are they reducing turnaround times? Are they increasing productivity? And the ones that do, then they become the solutions. And the ones that don't, then at least you've gleaned more information. So for our manual information gathering process, we standardized our request form and provided a script to our service desk coordinators so that when somebody would call them and request a new laptop or desktop, that the service desk would kind of coach them through providing all the information that was going to be needed on the very first time. We shut down some of our procurement channels because there are multiple procurement channels. We then floated so that there would be only one procurement channel. There were also competing demands for the field service technicians. So we studied and understood their kind of work and broke it into work queues, and we were able to apply a dedicated resource model specifically for these kind of of tasks and functions. And with iPhones, what we found was many people are very familiar with setting up a new iPhone. But a lot of people have their own. So rather than waiting for a technician to go on site to the person who ordered it and set up their wireless network and show them how to use it, that we created a self-deployment option where the phone would just go directly to that user, that they could self-deploy with a basic checklist. And rather than waiting for a networking team or a facilities team to come in and actually install a new network drop into an office, our standard deployment for desktops, we're now going to be using a wireless, which would shorten the installation time that it would take. So these just are more examples of problems and solutions within our value stream mapping in our Kaizen event study. And I'll get kind of to the crux of what we achieved is for iPhone fulfillment, the baseline was between 16 and 24 days, and that depended slightly on the time of year. If it was right before an iPhone release, sometimes we would hold off because the next generation of phones were coming out. But the baseline over a year was 16 to 24 days. What we achieved during the Kaizen event or the rapid improvement event was we reduced that down to 5 days. So then once you've shown that you're able to impact a process, then you continue to monitor it for 30 days out, and you continue to monitor until you've understood that you've effectively changed the process for good. And even at 90 days out and 6 months out, our process today is under 5 days. So it was a lasting change and a pretty significant value add from a customer perspective. For a laptop or a desktop fulfillment, the baseline was between 8 and 19 days, and very similarly, during the Kaizen event, we were able to reduce it down to 5 days. But now, at this point in time, more than 6 months later, we're able to, 5 days is our high water mark, and we do have some self-deploy laptops that we can turn around even as short as 24 hours. So once again, we're talking lean is not, typically people are happy with a 10% or a 20% improvement. Lean, if done right, can give you improvements like what we're showing here, where this is a 79 and a 74% improvement. And here's some of the graphing. We had a slight spike in September because the new iPhone was about to release, and this is last year's data. And then very similar kind of graph for the laptop and desktop results. So in the last slide, when we were done, we asked everyone that was part of this effort with the cross-functional group to give us some insights and quotes. And you can see here what their response was, and I haven't altered any of it. We weren't asking for quotes necessarily for a presentation like this, but we're giving that as part of our lean pilot just to really understand what they thought about it. It was really overwhelming. They felt empowered. And one of the quotes was, 2 dedicated weeks of focused work netted the equivalent of 9 months of regular work. So it was a dedicated week for the value stream mapping, a dedicated week for the Kaizen event. But out of that, they were able to achieve a greater than 70% improvement in both of those. Another one was, everybody has a great idea. And many times employees feel that they have great ideas, but they don't have a mechanism to get those ideas out there, and it's something more than a suggestion box. Another one was, for the first time, I feel like we're really thinking outside of the box. So hopefully in this short presentation of half hour, I've been able to give you just a very high level understanding of what lean is and kind of what UCSF has done to use that process and those tools and methods to achieve some results. And hopefully it's enough to make you kind of look at it a little bit more, maybe read a couple of books if anyone wants to, ask questions about books that I would recommend or how to get more plugged in. Feel free to ask me. But that's kind of the summary of what I have for today.
Well, thank you so much, Pierre. This is Melissa again. That was an excellent presentation. Really some amazing results that you're getting at UCSF here. Folks, I want to invite you to go ahead and start asking your questions in the questions panel if you have them. I'm going to go ahead and transition back to some closing slides of mine. And while you're asking your questions, giving you some final reminders, and then we'll get to the Q&A at the very end. Thank you again, Pierre. This is Pierre's contact information if you'd like to get in touch with him to learn more. And as I mentioned, I have a few reminders. For those who joined us later in the session, please feel free to visit our blog and join our Accomplishing More with Less groups on Facebook and LinkedIn. And you can also follow our founder, Pierre Khawand, on Twitter. We currently are running a leadership survey. It's very brief. It takes about 10 minutes. And as you can see here, there really are some amazing prizes that we're going to give away in a drawing. We've already done one drawing, but we're going to do another one in the coming months. First prize, a great value, complimentary seat in our leadership program. Second prize, you get a 1-hour review with author and CEO Adrienne Ott. She's the author of The 24-Hour Customer. You get to share your business idea, plan or marketing promotion with her. A third prize, a year of complimentary workshops at People-OnTheGo. Let's see, a Kindle here, and then a book as well from Pierre, our Accomplishing More with Less workbook. And the URL I sent you in the chat box if you'd like to check that out. Also want to remind you about some upcoming webinars. Accomplishing More with Less is coming up on October 11th, an excellent productivity webinar, effective meetings, staying focused in the ADD world, total organization, and project management. So a lot of complementary classes to this topic today. And of course, as you may know or may not know, we have many, many more courses available on our website. And so now the Q&A. I see we've had some questions come in. We had one earlier from Suzanne. Pierre, do you happen to know, I know that lean is used in many different industries now beyond manufacturing and automotive. Do you know if it's used for software development?
Yes, very much so. So there's a combination of agile development and lean is catching on and producing good results. Typically, those two methods are married together, though. It's not your traditional waterfall software development. It's more of an agile approach. But lean certainly can be, although I haven't seen it implemented with a waterfall approach, I'm sure there are lean aspects that can be applied.
Great, thank you. And by the way, we are having an Agile webinar next month at our free Lunch and Learn, so do look out for that. Great. Yes, quite appropriate. Nice. Yeah. Another great question here. When do you redo this process, and how frequently do you have to repeat it?
So for this particular process, well, our approach is we identify some known problem areas. But once you've gone through it once, what we typically do is we're expecting the workers that are doing it is they should be able to identify small glitches in the process, maybe something that they uncovered that's an exception. And at that point, they're empowered enough to make a decision jointly of, is this something that we just fix without having to go through a really long value stream mapping exercise? Do we just jointly fix, and do we ensure that everybody knows this is our new standard of work, or is it a bigger thing? Maybe it's a new technology that we're using or some new vendor that we're using. And at that point in time, if it warrants looking at it again, we can go through the similar process again. It's a much shorter turnaround because much of it's already done. A lot of the players know each other once again, and the cycle time is much shorter. So I would say it's as needed. I wouldn't say, it's something every year you do it.
Right.
Because for the most part, we're strategically we're focused on doing this to processes that we haven't done it to. So the focus is doing it, across the landscape, and then once it's done, it's expected to be somewhat of a grassroots effort that they continue to improve the process.
Great. And this might have a lot of variables here, but what are some average timeframes for completing the lean process improvement, of course, given different types of process improvements?
Sure. So typically, once you have engagement where you've identified the folks that need to go through this value stream mapping, and to ensure you have the right person there, let's assume we have all of that. So that is really about a 1-week process to map the current state, to take the leap to an ideal state, and then to settle on a future state. And when I say a dedicated week, I really mean the facilitator. At 8 o'clock, everyone is there, and the facilitator is insisting that no one is texting or checking email. It really has to be a dedicated week. Then after that, value stream mapping, typically wait at least 2 weeks to a month for people to kind of let ideas percolate, because they're thinking a bit about not necessarily solutioning it, but they're thinking more about the issue. Then about a month later, you have what's called a Kaizen event, or a rapid improvement event. Once again, that's a dedicated week. And then the first day, you go through kind of your problem statement again, and then you begin to develop what you think are potential solutions. By day 2, by day 3 and 4, you're implementing those solutions in some pilot workspaces, measuring the kind of the success of it. And by the 5th day, you're making a recommendation to leadership of, we're recommending this process change. So all in all, if you have the proper engagement, within probably 6 weeks, for a major work stream, you can get through one of these events. Now, coming at the end of that, you still may have some takeaways. 30 days out, we need to do this, and 60 days out. Sometimes, depending on what some of your solutions are, there may be some things that you cannot solve within 1 week. But you at least have a timeline of what those activities are. But facilitation of all of it is key, so that because everybody has a day job.
Right, right, exactly. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for staying over. We have just a couple more questions. Monica asks, she'd love to know about some books and other resources that you would recommend.
So, some books. There's one called Lean Thinking. I can't remember off the top of my head the authors of that. I would just say, feel free to reach out to me. Either on LinkedIn or on the email address that was provided, and I can post some books that I would recommend. It's pretty easily on Amazon. You can do a search by Lean, depending on your industry, if it's Lean IT you're looking for or Lean in general, and you can get a good feel of which books are highly rated. But Lean Thinking, is definitely one of the good ones.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Pierre. Just to answer the final questions here, yes, you will be getting a recording of this session as well as the slides, so you can review them as you like. So in closing today, I just want to remind you that a feedback form will pop up, and we would really appreciate it if you could take just a moment and give us your feedback. Pierre, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for staying after and answering questions. And
absolutely. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you, Pierre. And thank you all for joining us. And I hope to see you again at a future Lunch and Learn. I'll sign off now. Have a great day.